Welcome to What the Fuck Just Happened. I'm your host, Liz Enton. If you listen to the intro, you know my story. If not, here's a brief summary. I'm a sciencey skeptic, and when my dad died, I took a shot in the dark and decided to investigate if there was any possible evidence of an afterlife. I assumed that was as realistic as Santa Claus, but I was desperate. However, I was so blown away by what I discovered that I wrote a book and launched this podcast. In this podcast, I will be talking to some fairly normal people about some really weird shit. I speak with everyone from psychic mediums and afterlife researchers to ordinary people who've had some inexplicable experiences. So come, listen. There's no need to draw any final conclusions. Keep an open mind and wonder, what the fuck just happened? Hi everyone. In this episode, I continue my conversation with psychic medium Renee Buck. If you missed part 1, you might want to go back and listen to episode 3. In this episode 4, we talk about the time I did a past life regression with Renee, if past life regressions can actually be verified or considered evidential, what information mediums should get during a reading to show that they are genuinely connecting, and since one of those factors is gender, what happens if the deceased person the medium is bringing in was transgender or gender neutral? We also discuss what it feels like to Renee to give a psychic or medium reading. And one of my favorite parts, Renee shares a really what the fuck, highly evidential experience from a medium reading she gave. Lastly, I ask Renee some pretty awkward questions. And with that, let's jump right in.
Another thing I did with you that, in fact, I think you're the only medium that, at least I know personally, although I'm sure plenty of others do it, that does past life regressions. And I had one with you, and a really interesting experience.
Yes, you did.
Yes, I detailed it in my book. I had multiple questions, too, about it. And I'm just going to give my personal disclaimer. You might agree with this, you might not, but it's really hard to really call past life regressions fully evidential. I follow really closely the work of Drs. Ian Stevenson and Drs. Jim Tucker, who I will talk about further and who are written about quite extensively in my book, and you should also just Google them on your own. They're child psychiatrists who, from a very evidential, factual perspective, study kids with past life who make claims of past life memories. And one thing that really stood out to me, or two things. One regarding Dr. Ian Stevenson is that Carl Sagan claimed that Dr. Stevenson's work was worthy of further investigation. So it's not that Carl Sagan claims he thinks it really demonstrates past lives, as Carl Sagan wouldn't, but it's really a testimony to the thoroughness and logical approach of Dr. Stevenson. In Dr. Jim Tucker's work, JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, has backed up Dr. Jim Tucker's research and said that it's really valid and thorough and seems to really be pointing to kids actually demonstrating past life memories. They're not drawing that conclusion, but they validate that his research seems to back that up. So these are very, very logical, valid men. I also have to give a shout out to Renee because I didn't do it at the moment because I was so into her story. Did you guys catch that she talked about how she was doing, and it was an MBA, am I right, at MIT? Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually a Master's of Science in Management at MIT, yes.
So see, I know mediums there's a lot of stereotypes, which I held myself, that mediums are very illogical and woo, and Renee is incredibly logical, smart, science-minded, so I feel
I'm the greatest skeptic.
Well, I might give you a run for your money on that.
Yes, well, that's true. That's true. But I, proof is really important to me as well. And that's what I think drew me to spiritualist style of mediumship is because it's all based on proof, on evidence, on science. And if you can't prove it, then you won't ever be certified within the spiritualist church either. So, yeah. Anyway, continue.
So I did a past life regression with Renee, and it was just a really interesting experience. For me, there were these unexpected moments. I expected to go into a meditation. I expected to have the experience, which I did, of either making up or remembering, however you want to word it, stories of past lives. A few things I absolutely did not expect was how easily the information came to me.
Right.
Was a really weird moment in it where you said, there was a point where you said, we're going to download your guides and get some information and ask them questions that I had about my life that I didn't really know the answers to. It wasn't an option to ask evidential questions, like tell me this theory of string theory or something even much less philosophical, but something that I could then Google. But they were a little more life questions, such as, why am I still single? Or why didn't this one thing in my life work out? And what was interesting was information just poured out of me, and I did not remember it when I woke up. And then I listened to the recordings, was astounded by how fast I was speaking and the information I got about questions I felt blocked on in my life. And I thought that was fascinating. Plus this one moment twice during it where I felt as if Renee either ran her finger along my cheek or blew on my cheek. And I freaked out. And maybe if it had been anyone I didn't personally know the way I know Renee and trust, I would think that they did a trick where they ran their finger along my cheek or a feather or blew on my cheek. So there would be, I did freak out at that moment. But I trust Renee when she said she absolutely did not do that. And I asked her, probably I interrupted about 10 times. I kept saying, are you sure? And then we examined every way through her apartment to see if it could have been a wind or the turning of a page where she was taking notes. We could not come up with a normal explanation. So that was, I would say, my experience doing a past life regression with Renee, as well as her incredible patience with, I do remember one point there was a question I asked, that was being delved into in my regression where I was to ask, how was there anything related to a past life that led me to go decide in this life, in my response to grief, to explore scientific evidence of an afterlife? And I feel one thing that stood out to me in this exploration is that I pretty easily found the very logical, verifiable, much more reputable people and people that I would take seriously. And Renee was saying, while I'm under this meditation, she's like, so we're going to examine how you went from skeptic to believer. And I was like, I don't believe anything. And I just interrupted the whole thing and freaked out for about 10 minutes. It was like, you cannot call me a believer. I seek evidence. I don't believe things. And Renee was really patient. Let me have my 10-minute freakouts where she's like, okay, Liz, why don't we just get back to this? But so Renee has been very patient with me for a long time. But that was my little anecdote of my past life regression. And so, I'd love to know your thoughts on it, your experiences doing past life regressions and guiding people in them, because I don't even know specifically what to ask. Just share if you don't mind, just sharing a little bit what it's like for you.
Well, firstly, I would add that your regression was not just past life, but also life between lives, which is where you are allowed to sort of ask, remember those prepared questions that we had in advance that you get to ask your guides. And so a life between lives regression is where you're actually taken to the other side and you get to meet with your guides and we go through this set of questions. So I think what is always interesting, especially for people who are, unsure about it or who are doubting about whether it's going to be their subconscious that's speaking or whether it's coming from somewhere else, is actually the speed of information that's flowing through, and things that later you are surprised by, things that, you wouldn't have said, in your conscious thinking.
I still have not drawn a conclusion as to which it is personally. I don't deny what Renee's saying, but I also don't back it up completely. I'm going to stand that I don't know which it is.
And that's fine. I think because when I went into it, after I had read a book by Dr. Michael Newton called Destiny of Souls, he specialized in life between life regressions, right? I was really curious about it, and I wanted to have an experience that gave me some proof, that this is really possible. Because I'm a believer. I believe in the afterlife. I believe in spirit. So I'm a little further than you there, but I need to have the experience myself in order to fully accept what's coming through and where it's coming from. And so when I had my first experience with Life Between Lives hypnosis, the one piece that fully confirmed for me that I was communicating with my guides, even though I could see them, I was, I was in this room, and round white room, blah, blah. The piece that confirmed it for me was that they showed me on this screen a past life of myself as a sea captain in like the 1700s. And I, even in the hypnosis, as I listen back to it, I'm laughing because I get seasick so badly now. Like, I hate being out on a boat. Like, that's the last thing that I could ever imagine myself. And so I was, even my conscious thinking mind, while I was in the hypnosis, was thinking, this just doesn't seem plausible, that man on the ship is the captain, right? Then that's me, that was me. It just didn't make sense. The next thing, I think the therapist said, well, what is the ship doing? What are you doing on this ship? And the answer was that we were intercepting slaving ships and forcing them, taking the slaves and bringing them back to Africa, because the slave trade was illegal. And so this was illegal activity. And so... as
morally despicable, I will just add.
Yeah, exactly, right? And I was a very principled sea captain. I was like, not going to let this happen. And so even in the hypnosis recording, I say to my therapist, I don't know if that's even true. I don't even know if that was even a thing. And he's like, well, something to look up later. I'm like, yeah. I mean, I was very doubtful, even as I was in the hypnosis, which is a little bit like Liz, like that you were, right? There was a part of you that was doubting what was going on. But anyway, so I finished my session, and that the first thing I did when I got home was to look that up. And indeed, there were ships patrolling the Atlantic whose purpose was to intercept the slave trade and bring them back.
I never knew, actually, until right now that existed. That's great that it did exist. I wish there'd been more of it, or wish it didn't have to exist in the first place.
I mean, I don't know that anybody knows that, unless they're a huge, history buff. But that's the kind of thing that, when you can go and look it up later, that will convince you that, okay, well, that part was really true, and that was what I was really doubting. And so it helps you to accept so much of the other stuff that came through as well, those little nuggets of evidence.
I didn't get anything as evidential as that. I'd say maybe the closest things I could say to evidential were probably, from my experience, that how the memories, which again I can't call this evidential exactly, the memories felt more like memories than when I made something up. It felt very equal to remembering a time in my past, like remembering my nursery school or elementary school. And they were vivid that way, as if in a memory. Then there were a few things I remember that I had. One of my...
Were they not more vivid in the hypnosis? Typically, your senses are much more heightened.
They weren't more vivid than remembering an actual memory, but they were much more vivid. They were equal to an actual memory.
Okay.
But I have a very good memory of my actual life. So it equated that. But it wasn't more heightened. But I did lose a sense of time. I thought it had been about an hour, And it was about 3 or 4 hours. It was some crazy.
It was a long time, yeah.
Really long, and it went really fast. So I would say things were evidential just in one sense, in the sense that it was just so much was a different type of experience, the level of lost time, the amount of, the way memories poured in so easily, the way I understood things about my life, and when we got into the asking with spirit guides and seemed to be giving answers so easily that I felt very stuck on. But if we're going to go for hardcore evidence of Googling something that I said that was backed up as factual, the only disclaimer to that, and I do think just out of integrity it's important to say, is we can't know for a fact that you hadn't read that somewhere when you were maybe a teenager and stored it in your subconscious. I mean, we can't prove that. We can say, we can go into probabilities, but that is one of the issues always a little bit with past life regressions.
Yes, of course. I mean, that information is out there.
That being said, that's absolutely fascinating. And I think it's really, I mean, it's definitely worth putting in a bucket of evidence from my perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. The reason that they showed that to me was that they were saying that the theme that was running through my lifetimes was the value of a human life. It didn't matter the gender, the race, the socioeconomic circumstance. It didn't matter what the person looked like or the situation that they were in, that they had value as a human. And in every one of my lifetimes, I would be the champion of people, the voice that said we are all equal.
Which is very much your values today, too. I mean, that hasn't stopped. Renee's my friend I've gone to, like, the Women's March with, and, we both are really, we have endless discussions about our rage of how people are being treated today and our caring about equality. So that's been a consistent.
And it was in that context. So the therapist said, can you show Renee an example of a lifetime where this was, her actions were as loud as her words? And that was the lifetime that they took me to, was the one on the ship. So that, I found that all, like, I would never have put myself on a ship because I get seasick so badly. So anyway, all of those things sort of taken together made it feel more believable to me.
So when I took your class, I know there's just so much stereotypes that mediums give really general information, but I know that you believe in being an evidential medium. Anyone who ever gets certified by the Forever Family Foundation needs to give evidence, not general information. And you taught that there were specific things that a reading needs to start with, that a medium needs to get. Would you mind sharing with everybody what those are?
It can vary sort of, teacher to teacher. But I think the sort of the key things that you should be able to identify is the relationship of the spirit to the person who's sitting, or the sitter who's receiving the information. So that connection, you should be able to identify how the gender of the person, how they passed, and then something else very specific about them. And that can be either, what career they were in, what, maybe if they had an unusual hobby or something, that can be an identifiable factor, maybe where they lived, or if they were from another country, where they were from. So that, that last piece can be something that's just very specific and identifiable to the person in spirit, but that the sitter would understand or recognize, or possibly later have to look up and come back and report.
What happens with gender? I remember you once had an interesting story with that. What if someone's transgender?
Oh, yeah, right. I did have, it was around that class time, I had a reading with a mother whose child had come in, it was child in spirit, and I couldn't actually tell the gender of the child, which was a very unusual thing. I said, I feel like I'm getting both genders. And she said, well, actually, my child is transgender. Started out as a girl. I'm not sure which way it went, but that validated that confusion in gender between the body and the soul, I guess, was validated in the reading.
And when you say get the gender, what does that mean? Or get the career, or get the age? Do they come and is it like someone sitting there and saying to you, hi, I'm a girl. I died at 30 years old. I was a teacher.
Well, every medium receives information differently. We use all of our senses. For me specifically, it's most of that information will come through visually or clairvoyantly. So in a reading, my eyes are closed and imagery, it's either like a video clip or just a set of images, shifting images will appear to show me that. When it comes to gender, however, that's something that is sentience, so feeling or sensing. And I don't know how to explain the sensation of a female versus a male. It just feels different. Yeah, it's just a different feel. Gender also is part of seeing. So sometimes I see them coming in as a woman or I see them as a man. But if it's just an energy, if I just see a light and they're not clear visually, I will still be able to sense the gender. Yeah.
And when you say see, do you see them as if it looks like the person sitting in the room next to you?
It's not as clear as if they're sitting right in the room with me. It's sort of a little bit hazy generally for me, but I can get a sort of a sense of body type, of age. I can sense the character, so that's where more sensing comes in. I can sense if they were sort of playful, like to play jokes on people, or if they were just very sweet and loving, very light, if they liked to be the life of the party with all the focus on them. Like those different sensations of character will also come in with the person. And if they're shy, oftentimes they're like off to the side, like the last one in, they're the quiet, they're waiting to be invited in, so they will almost act out their personalities in the course of the reading and behave as they might here on the earth plane, which contributes to the evidentiality of recognizing them.
Is there a reading you gave that just, you're like, holy shit, that was evidential, or a moment in a reading or a verification? Is there just one standout that you feel okay sharing? That you would tell that you would have told me when you first met me, the biggest skeptic that's okay, come on, tell me.
I guess I would say there's I never remember a whole reading because, we're just vessels. We're just, the stuff flows through us and out and done. But there are bits and pieces of readings that always stand out to me that are fun. I can think of a couple recent ones that had to be validated after the client left. And I think those are kind of the most fun ones, and they had to do with finding things. So there was a client recently who, at the very end of the reading, her father was speaking. Her father was in spirit, and her father pointed to his daughter and said, she's got a question for you. And so I said, okay. And I asked my client, I said, you have a question for your dad that you want to ask? And she said, yes, I do. I want to ask him what happened to the painting. And I said, okay, the painting. And she said, well, I painted a painting for him, and he had it hanging in his bathroom. And he said he took it down to bring it into work to show his friends at work. And after he passed, we couldn't find the painting anywhere. And I just wonder what happened to it. I asked her father, and her father showed me that it was in the house, but that it was covered up. It was in a dark place. I couldn't tell if it was under a bed or in a closet, but it was in a dark place and then covered up with stuff. And she said, well, I have looked everywhere and I can't find it in the house. And so I went back to him and I said, well, you heard that. So, and he's like, no, it's there. It's there. So I said, okay, well, he says it's there. So it's just in a dark place and it's covered up with stuff. 2 days later, I got a text from her and she said, I found it. It was in the closet, covered up with stuff. That was pretty cool. Yeah. It looked everywhere, again, but then went back to some of the dark places And sure enough, there it was. So that was fun. And then there was another woman who came to me recently. She was bringing a friend of hers for the reading, so she wasn't actually having the reading. But when she met me at the gate, she pulled on.
And they come to your place, just to clarify, because you never, for example, never went to that woman's house to even know she necessarily lives in a house or over an apartment. They come to your home.
Right. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know that she was actually living in her father's house while she was sorting through stuff, but I knew that it was in his house. So I don't know if that's relevant. But anyway, so then the second example, so this woman who had been to me before for a reading a couple of years ago, and I didn't remember anything about the reading, but when I met them at the gate to come in, she pulled on this chain and she said, "I found it." And I said, "Okay, I'm not sure what you mean." She goes, "The chain, remember the chain that I was looking for?" And I said, "Actually, I don't remember, but maybe you can refresh my memory." She said, "Well, when I was here last and I asked if you could ask my daughter where the chain was that she had given me because I can't find it. And you told me that to look behind a radiator, that it had fallen behind a radiator." So when she went home, she found it behind a radiator. So she was wearing that chain to show me. So that was pretty fun. Let's see, what else? Sometimes when I'm getting ready for clients to come, Spirit will motivate what jewelry I'm wearing or, what I'm putting out on the table. They'll just somehow guide me in my choices that morning as I prepare. And there was one particular morning where I felt like, I should wear all my turquoise today. So I had turquoise earrings, I had a turquoise necklace, I had turquoise on my bracelets, and I didn't know why, but I felt like there was going to be some reason. So when I met my client at the gate, I noticed that she was wearing a necklace with a big piece of turquoise on it. And I said, "Oh, notice my jewelry. I felt inspired today to wear all my turquoise jewelry. And I don't have very much of it. This is all of it right now that I'm wearing." And she said, "Oh, wow." She said, "My daughter, who's in spirit, loved turquoise. And in fact, she was buried in a turquoise casket." Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I said, "Don't tell me anything more though, because I want, to bring the rest of the evidence through in the reading." And she's like, "Okay, well, it's a good sign that she's already working with you." I said, "It is a good sign." And then the reading went on to be quite amazing and filled with good evidence. And in fact, you know what? I wrote a story. I wrote a blog post about that. I think I
read it, or you told me, because I remember that story now that you're telling it. Lastly, it's kind of a two-part question because sometimes people are like two sort of the awkward questions. First of all, can you read minds? Like if someone's thinking something really awkward, like they're there with their boyfriend and being like, "Oh my God, I hate him," and like I think that other guy's hot, or I mean something even more embarrassing. Like if people are having really embarrassing thoughts, can you read their minds?
Cannot.
Okay,
cannot,
good.
No, but it is a typical fear that people have when they find out that I'm a medium, and so I will often follow with, "But don't worry, I can't read your mind." So yeah, no,
good, because
it doesn't happen
from the awkward perspective. And then now the other awkward question that I know I've asked you, but I think other people want to know, and people get embarrassed asking. So, most people don't want their grandparents around while they're like having sex and having awkward experiences, or just like naked in the shower. They probably don't want
yeah, exactly.
This pile of spirits. Like, I don't know. I think of maybe some guys I grew up with, who, you'll sadly pass away, or just, I don't necessarily want them like hanging out while I'm in the shower. I don't want my grandpa in the room while I'm like having sex. What's up with that? How do we?
So there's something called the privacy veil. And I honestly don't know the mechanics of it, but as I understand it, if you're doing something or engaged in some activity where it's not appropriate for spirit to be observing, a privacy veil sort of automatically goes up and they are no longer able to observe, or they simply know that, this is not for me to be part of, I'm leaving.
Can you and the spirit be in disagreement about what's privacy? Again, like some creepy guy who passed away being in your shower. Like, I might not want that. They might think that's fantastic. So that could be a disagreement. What do we do about that?
It could be a disagreement, exactly. Well, you can always talk to them. You can say, okay, listen, everybody out, I want my privacy. And, spirit, they do what we ask of them. So if you're ever in doubt, just say, everybody has to go. You can sage your apartment too, which, well, I don't know. Saging is basically clearing energies that are sort of heavier energies. When I sage before a reading, it's to clear out any spirits who are here that don't need to be here and invite only those in that I'm seeking to connect with. So, but yeah, if you're concerned that there are spirits hanging around you that you really don't want or haven't invited, then saging your home or apartment is probably a good activity. But also just saying out loud, okay, anybody who's here, please leave. I want to be alone. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. My God. Okay, it's been an hour and a half. I have 80 more things that we could talk about. So including, I already have questions about, are spirits really more evolved? Some might be. Some I highly doubt are. Like, is Donald Trump going to die and the next day be this highly evolved, kind spirit? I'm going to guess no, but that's all, because we both probably have to do other things. I would love to have you back again at some point.
So, well, thank you for inviting me, Liz. I really enjoyed this, and that you reach a lot of people with your book and your podcast and all the other things that you're doing. It's, I think it's a very worthy cause and a worthy effort.
Thank you. And if any of you are interested in getting a reading with Renee or a past life regression or just reading her blog and learning more about these fascinating stories, her site is called Whispers from the Light, and I will have all the links in the podcast notes.
To get more information on what the fuck just happened, to get updates on when the book launches, download Grief Bingo, and more, go to WTFJustHappened.net, check us out, and subscribe to our newsletter. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if you've had any crazy what the fucks yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hi, reach out either on Instagram at WTF_just_happen_ or email me at hello@WTFJustHappened.net. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder, what the fuck just happened?